There we go. Is that better? Good. You ever say something to your wife and you get that eye, that look, men? You get that look and you know you're in trouble. Bob. Pray, yeah, you know, we forget sometimes when we hear about events happening around the world and things. They've got like hurricane that's hitting Hawaii now, and I guess Maui is getting hit pretty bad, and a lot of like 30 inches of rain, things like that. The Solibas that we have in Colombia, that was a pretty bad earthquake. And we forget about that. And then also the people we have in Africa and areas where it's difficult ministries. I forget, I was reading an article one time recently about how many Christians have been killed by the Muslims in those areas in Africa, and it's just amazing. I mean, we don't hear about it. Media, nobody tells us about it. But I mean, hundreds of thousands. And Sudan, South and North Sudan, and they have a lot of that sometimes. So it's just a lot of things we hear about, that we have missionaries in those areas. And so it's something that we certainly need to remember our missionaries and pray for them. Actually, on our Wednesday night prayer time, the prayer letter has a list of the missionaries on the back. So if you want to have that, it's available to you. And good group today. I'm excited. I'm excited about this. The only thing that worries me, well, Pastor's here, so I'm not going to say anything. He has a habit of grabbing up 10 or 12, here and there and starting a new class, which is good for somebody. We're jealous, aren't we? And we should be, of our classes or our ministry when people take people from the church or things like that. And, I hate it when people leave the church and it's like, what? Did somebody say something to you? What is it that you don't like about Victory Baptist? I mean, this is, but there's always something you can find if you're looking for it. There's always something you can find. My tie may not be the color you like, so it'd be time to move on. Who knows what the deal is? All right. I'm going to get away a little bit from what we've been discussing at the beginning. We get to chapter 9, we'll talk about the second coming again of the Lord when we get into the 70 weeks. It's been interesting as we've studied Daniel. Each chapter brings with it some excitement. I mean, really, if you look at it, the first chapter, we had Daniel about the food that he eat, and he took a stand. And we're talking about a boy that's somewhere between 15, 17 years old, and he stood up and said, I'm not going to take the king's meat. But he didn't say it in a disrespectful manner. He said it in a manner of, let's try this. And after 10 days, they were better. He and the three, Mishael, Azariah, and Hezariah, something like that. Got them in my brain here somewhere. But they all, they looked better. And then chapter 2 was the big dream, vision of the head of gold and the arms and all of silver and brass and all of that, and the rock that's cut without cut without hands, that hits the feet and destroys, grinds up the idol into the image into powder. and the wind blows it away, which there's kind of where we got off into the second coming, because there's coming a day when this earth shall be dissolved. We drive around every day and we have this to do and we have that to do, and all these things are going on in our life. And you know, one day, my beautiful home in Weston will be dissolved. All of your homes will be dissolved. We will be, the rapture will take place. The tribulation will happen, and there'll be some great times of suffering and things, and then there'll be the second coming when Christ comes back to destroy the enemies, and then that 1,000-year reign of Christ. There'll be a time when all of this will be destroyed, and there'll be set up a new heaven and a new earth. I'll not get into that today. But when we get to chapter 9, we'll get into more of that, right? Daniel, the lesson today is in chapter 5. I'm just going to go to verse 16, and we will take our lesson from that. Daniel has come a long ways. By the time we get to chapter 5, Daniel is somewhere in his mid to late 80s. He started, remember, when he was 15 years old. Well, let's go back. Israel, God told Manasseh that king, that I am going to take Israel and wipe it as a man cleans a plate and flips it upside down. What I'm going to do to Jerusalem and that area, what I'm going to will tickle men's ears. They will be shocked at what happens. And then God gives them hope. Josiah. And for 37 years, this young man, he was 37 years of age. At age 8, he became king. At age 16, he began to seek the Lord. At age 20, he began to cleanse the land of all the idols. At age 26, he went in and cleansed out the temple and cleaned out all of the idols out of the temple and cleansed the temple, and had one of the greatest, the largest Passover in Israel's history. Over 30,000 animals. Now, try to figure this out. They had to slaughter those animals, actually more than that 30,000, but they had to slaughter those animals all in one day and offer them as sacrifices all in one day. It was huge Passover. He even went up into the northern kingdom and brought those people back, which had already been destroyed, and they were just... the people up there were all blended. The Samaritans, what Jesus went through, and you know about that. And he even went up through there and cleaned that area out, and then cleaned Israel out. And in the temple, they found something amazing. What did they find? What did they find in the temple? Come on. They found the Word of God. And it's like, wow. And it's read to the king, and then the king, Josiah, reads it to the people. And what did it do? It humbled them. When they began to see what God expected of them, it humbled them. Then Josiah, Egypt was, let me see. You got the sea here, and you have Jerusalem here. And this goes up. But this is the Jordan River. Egypt came up and went up and fought a battle in Carchemish. For some reason, 37-year-old King Josiah just thought it was a good idea to go fight the Egyptians. They didn't have a fight with Israel. And so it just, the hand of God moving is all you can say. Nobody can explain why he did this. And an arrow, he was shot with an arrow. They brought him back. He died. And then one of his younger sons became the king of Israel, and he was a bad king. And once the Egyptians conquered Carchemish, they came down and they took Israel and Jerusalem, or Judah basically. They took them, and they became vassal to the Egyptians. And then the Egyptians went back down. They were taxing Israel. Then Babylon came over and defeated Egypt over here around Carchemish. And they came down and they took up on Jerusalem and Judah. And that was Jehoiakim was the king at that time. He had only been reigned for like 3 years. And it was at this time, during the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim, that Daniel was taken all the way over to here. Daniel was somewhere around 15. If you can imagine this, he was a son. He was a son of a very wealthy family in Judah, perhaps part of the king's family in Judah. He was a highly educated young man. He and his 3 friends, plus a lot of others, were all taken back to Babylon. But King Nebuchadnezzar, he was actually he was a joint king with his father at this time. And he came down and took these young men, pulled them away from their family. They don't know if they're going to live or die. They are marched on a 700-mile trip, chained together, all the way around over, and not knowing what's going to happen to them. They enter Babylon, which is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. A lot of blue tile and things. It was a magnificent place. Somewhere over 200,000 people were in this place. These young men are away from their family. They don't have a clue what's going to happen from one day to the next. Fear would have taken them as they were traveling along, chained together as they made this trip all the way around. This would have been a terrifying trip. Daniel, as he enters Babylon, and fortunately has these 3 friends, so together they can, and there's a lot of others that were with them. So they put them in college, and they trained them. They didn't take the poor, the down and outers. They didn't take the uneducated. They took, on this first trip, they took the most educated. Later when he comes back, and Jehoiakim he dies out of fear. And Jehoiachin, his son, you will know him as Jeconiah in Matthew and Luke. That's where he's in the genealogy. They take him back, but they take Daniel and his guys, and they come down here. And this will be the group that goes and starts back up and starts Jerusalem and starts the temple again later. But Daniel and his guys, as they go in, they are trained in the highest grade of education that you can imagine. If they were in the United States, I don't know what college I would refer it to, but it would be one of the best colleges and the best training that they could get. But I think Daniel was pretty much a genius. That plus the Spirit of God dwelling within him gave him wisdom in excess. I don't know if I could say excess, but great wisdom. And so Daniel, in the first time he it was chapter 1, it was about food. Chapter 2, he was called in, and this is around the 4th year that Daniel is there. He's called in to show Nebuchadnezzar the dream, that dream of that statue, that vision of the head of gold and the silver and the brass. Nebuchadnezzar, he liked that dream. And so in chapter 4, he built himself a 90-foot statue of himself plated with gold. What a beautiful thing that had to have been. And then he wanted everybody to bow to it. Who didn't bow? Children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They didn't bow. And so they were cast into the fiery furnace. And of course, they didn't burn. They didn't bow. They didn't burn. And so we had that in chapter 4. Now in chapter 5, we have another 30-year or so period of time. So we're coming now to the close of the Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar. We're coming now to that chest of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire that's going to be taking over. As a matter of fact, in chapter 5, as we begin to read chapter 5, Cyrus is taking the river and is changing its channel so that he can come in under the gates of the city, because the walls of the city were impregnable. You couldn't get through them. And so he's coming through this way, and he's making his way into the city. And during that period of time, well, that's where our story starts. And the first 4 verses, there's one word that stands out to me. And see if you can find that word. And so let's look at it. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. And they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple and out of the house of God, which were at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, their wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver and of brass and iron and wood and stone. So what one word stands out to you in those verses? I think we had a bunch of drunks. Wow. The more I read these things, the more I see this as a party. Now, one thing, let's picture this. 1,000 people. What would it take to seat 1,000 people? How big of a building would you have to seat 1,000 people? I own a building downtown that's 32,000 square feet. I'm sure that I could probably put 1,000 people in half of that building. So I would say from 10,000 square feet to larger, it might be able to get 1,000 people. Now, thinking about this, they're all eating. So they would have long tables with chairs on each side, servants being able to go back and forth throughout the party. 1,000 people. Now think of how much wine you got to have. I mean, they're having a party. This is not like let's have a little cup of wine. This is a party. This is a young man. This is not an old man. The old men know better. They should know better. with a young man. What is he celebrating? The enemy is outside the gate. Did he just have a victory that he's won? What is he celebrating? Is this how he always does? What is the deal here? This had to be a special celebration. And so it's amazing to me as I study this and look at this, the more that I find, it's what's amazing to me. And I have this thing, I posted it on my Facebook one time, I don't know. And it was talking about the grandfather was faithful to church, and the father didn't think that necessarily it was as necessary. And then the son of the father, the grandson, well, it's not that big a deal. And then the next son said, who is Jesus? And that's kind of how things work sometimes. You know, pastors, one of the hardest things for pastors, and our pastor is an exception, but even, and you kids can just try to imagine if your father started the church when he and Susan first got married. He started the church and worked as hard as he does now. Would he have spent as much time with you? And what happens is pastors start a work. They're banging doors, they're working, and they're working. The wife is taking care of the kids, and they're not spending as much time with the kids. And I can't tell you how many pastors whose kids never, ever trusted Christ as their Savior. And then went off wild. Actually, Franklin Graham was one, Billy Graham's son. He came back, and he's a man of God today. But you can see that. And so what we see here is not a graduation, but a decline in the family. We're talking about a grandson here that doesn't know about, and this is the same way with kings and priests and well, look at Eli's I'm trying to get the Eli's sons. I mean, they had the tabernacle out there, and they put up a tent of prostitution outside the tabernacles where they can make money. The sons of Eli. So we see this happen, this decline in these characters. So here's a son that has been taken care of all of his life. And the enemy is outside the gate, and so he has decided, let's have a party and get drunk. How do I know they got drunk? Well, I'll go when we get to verse 4, I'll show you how I know they did. And so we find the first verse here, Belshazzar the king had a great feast, 1,000 lords, and drank wine before them. Now, this was prophesied by Isaiah in chapter 21 and verse 5 and Jeremiah 51 and verse 39. Isaiah was probably 150 years ahead of this. Jeremiah was during his period of time, and his prophetical ministry was during this same period of time. And they drank wine before the 1,000. Weak men, I wrote down, weak men drink wine to escape reality. Strong men prepare to meet it. Belshazzar, whilst he had tasted the wine, this is good wine, commanded to bring the golden vessels. Well, now I think he probably tasted a little more than just a taste before he made this decision. The decision now that Nebuchadnezzar makes sealed his doom. Though God already knew this sealed his doom. And what was he thinking? What was he thinking? It says he decided to take the golden and silver vessels, which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines might drink wine therein. Wives and concubines. This young man's having a party all of his life. So he wanted now he's included, not only the guests are going to be involved in this, he's included the servants. The servants now have to go to the temple, the grand temple of Marduk or Bel, of the god that was the master god of all of the gods. He had to go to those gods, that temple, they all had to go there. There's 1,000 people there. And so they went in and began to gather up all of the golden and the silver vessels that had taken from the temple. How many were they? I don't know. But I do know that Cyrus sent 5,000, was it 4,500 or 5,500 vessels? 5,400 vessels, I think. Along with, to the temple that was being rebuilt in Jerusalem. So he sent all of those back. So there had to be, it's 5,400 of the vessels. Belshazzar is who he sent them with, and that's in your number 2 of your notes, B. Ezra 1, 7 through 11. So now what he has all of these temples, all of these golden vessels, and he has all of these people that's beginning to drink wine out of these golden vessels. They brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple, the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, his concubines, drank in them. Oh, they drank wine. And then it says they praised the gods of gold. So that's one drink. The gods of silver, that's another drink. The gods of brass, that's another drink. The gods of iron, that's another drink. The gods of wood, that's another drink. And the gods of stone, that's another drink. That'd pretty much light them up. And I marvel as I see this king obviously doesn't worship any god. There's no gods that he cares about. He's disrespecting all of them. It's just kind of like, what can I do to disrespect every god that there ever was? I just want to, not only do I not want to, I want to ignore them. I don't want to ignore them. I want to degrade them. And we see that today in our country. We see that today in our country. It just boggles the mind. What's wrong with drinking a little wine? But Jesus did it. Well, I don't believe the wine that Jesus drank he could have drank the whole barrel and it not bother him. I don't believe that was a fermented wine. That's just my own personal thought. But Proverbs tells us that wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever partaketh thereby is not wise. Now, I like to use the word stupid, but we'll just use wise as the better word, perhaps. And so we have to be careful. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrows? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without a cause? Who hath redness of the eyes? They that tarry long at the wine, they that seek mixed wine. And if you go on with that same scripture in Proverbs 23, it's kind of like, I was in the Navy for 5 years. I can associate with this. I can understand this. It talks about the staggering, the falling down, the throwing up. And then it talks about getting up the next day and doing it all over again. Well, the Word of God now comes and puts a little fear in their minds. We have, I guess, a picture. I was trying to find a picture of the party. Rembrandt painted a picture of the party, but it was real dark, and I didn't know if you could see how 1,000 people out there. But Belshazzar would have been elevated on a platform with his wives and his... It just keeps bringing up wives and concubines, like Daniel is wanting you to know that he's wanting you to know this event and understand the debauchery that was going on at this event. At the same time, keep in mind, the enemy was outside the gate breaking in. And so the same hour, so God gave him a little bit of time, came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the pilaster on the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. So, the pilaster is basically, it's talking about a plaster wall. And it wouldn't have been white. It would have been all colors. There may have been white in it, but there would have been a lot of blue and a lot of ornaments and things. It would have been elegant. It would have been like Donald Trump made it. And there's a light, and I can imagine how this all began to come about, because he immediately turns, or he immediately sees what's being written on the wall. There was something that caught his attention, and immediately he began to see what was written on the wall, or the hand that was writing on the wall. The letters on the wall did not frighten him. What frightened him was the hand. The hand as it wrote. And the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, and his joints of his loins were loose, and his knees smote against each other. Now, that's a fear. When your knees are knocking, you're afraid. And I have other things. I just wrote real quickly here. Flushed with fear, fear of the unknown, guilt, conviction of sin, shaking. I'll let you read what I wrote. And I add all of this up, and you have great fear. This shook him up so bad that he was in a state of shock. And then came in all of the king's wise men. Well, in verse number 7, he asked to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, and all of the people. But he didn't ask to bring in Daniel. And I keep wondering, why didn't I ask Daniel first, knowing he was the wise man? He was he was the master of the wise men, the Bible tells us. He was the master of the wise men. Why didn't they bring in Daniel? People don't want to know the truth. They bring in these other guys because they want good news. They don't want to know the truth. And if you're going to be reading and understanding the Word of God, you have to have someone that can tell you the truth. Problem with many churches today, they don't tell you the truth. They tell you good things, but they don't necessarily tell you the truth. Then came all the king's wise men and everything. They couldn't read it. And then the king Belshazzar, greatly troubled and conscious, and everything changed in him. His lords were astonished. They were looking at him because of the fear that was in him, and they were looking at what had just happened. They don't understand it. Nobody understands it. 1,000 people are there, and they don't understand it. And so then comes in the queen. Now the queen is the mother of this young king, or the grandmother. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king, she heard about this, and so she came in to give him comfort and to give him some wisdom. Isn't it amazing? He didn't have any wisdom. This was an idiot. No, I'm sorry. He was foolish. There was a man in the kingdom. There is a man that knows, that can tell you. He is spirit of the, he is the whom the spirit of the gods, and the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, came to say. I want you to look at a verse here real quick for the next bell. Let's see if we can get down to it. Verse number 13. Then was Daniel brought in the king, and listen to the king's words. And the king spake unto him, saying, Art thou Daniel? And now he degrades him. In this king's mind, Daniel is a Jew. The way people treat Jews today, right? Which art of the children of captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? Are you that Jew disrespectfully answering? Are you that Jew that my father brought as a slave into this place? We're going to see next week, Daniel has no love for this young man. I've heard of thee. Well, of course, your mother just told you. And now the wise men, the astrologers, they couldn't answer it. And then in verse number 16, and I have heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations, dissolve doubts. That word dissolve doubts means he can solve riddles, untie knots. And if you do this, I'll give you a chain around your neck. Do you think that 85-year-old Daniel could care less about that chain? Do you think that impressed him? We'll see next week. Father, thank you for this day. And God, I pray you'll just bless thy word. And God, I pray you'll be with Pastor this morning and empower him. God, I pray you'll bless him. And Lord, I just pray you'll use him to give us the words that you have given to him, that we might grow and that we might be encouraged and strengthened in the faith. Pray for salvation of souls today. And Father, I just pray you'll just bless this church. In